everybody? It's your man James, Mr. Sequential Art, back again with some more video action for you. Welcome to the show, everyone. As you know, this is one of my new little things to do around here. Sequential Art Showcase is where I get together with a great artist and we talk about some of their artwork and their philosophies on it, things of that nature. And today is a good one because I got a great person here for you. Someone has been in the business for well over 3 decades. He's done a lot of great work at all the great big publishers: Marvel, Image, Valiant, DC, done tons of work, especially in the realm of the cosmic side, on books like Silver Surfer, Quasar, Green Lantern, The Deadly Duo, Mars Attacks Image, Exo-Man of War, the first at CrossGen Books. He's just a master of the cosmos, as it were. And then on top of all that, now he's got his own stuff that he does, and of course with the First Man, which is his spot in the cosmos, and he's taken on a new role now of heading in the opposite direction of the cosmos and going with sword and sorcery with his new creation, kor-drath. So it's like a kind of a Conan pastiche, only much more violent, much more manly, much more everything you expect in a sword and sorcery type of book. So let's bring him in here and let's get the show on the road and say, this here he is, the myth, the legend, the artist, the aficionado, the connoisseur, the man who made roid rage into an artistic statement, Mr. Andy Smith. Andy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Hello. What an introduction. Wow.
Yes.
I was like,
yes.
Wait a second. I thought I was the guest. Who's this guy talking about?
Yes. But I'm glad you could join me. Are you excited to see what art I have for you that I have of yours? Are you excited to see that? You want to see some of your sweet art in someone else's hands?
Sure, why not?
Okay, well, before we get to our art, we always do a little Q&A type session here thing, a little get to know the artist a bit. So to start it all off, let's say, what has it made you want to get into comics? What did little Andy, what was like his first comic? And he's like, hey, this is awesome. I got to do this stuff.
Well, as a kid, I always drew, ever since I could color with crayons and stuff. I just like to draw. And I always say that the difference between comic artists or just artists in general is, most kids start off with coloring and stuff when they're 2, 3 years old, whatever. And then as they get older and they can do more things, they move on. But for people like me and just artists in general, we don't. It's just something in us that we have to keep doing. And so I was doing that, and I always loved cartoons. And then the first comic book I ever bought was Captain America 275 by Mike Zeck and John Beatty. And then I just, I subscribed to it, so I'd get it in the mail, and I still have those. I love that stuff so much. And I just was like, when I saw the credits in the book, and this is, 1982, 83, something like that, I was like, oh, damn, people get paid to do this. And I kind of just started, drawing superheroes and stuff. And I just want to do it, something about reading comics and, as a kid, the joy you got out of reading them and stuff and being able to share them with your, with friends, just talk about them and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was just, that was it. I never want to be like, and this is, like I said, 82, 83. So there were still illustrators doing things for magazines and stuff. And I mean, there still are now, but not nearly as much, obviously. So, but I never had any interest in doing that. Never wanted to do, book cover paintings, like Joe Jusko is fantastic at and what he's doing. I love looking at him, but once again, never really wanted to do that. Just want to draw comics. So I kind of dove in head first, and that was it. That was my sole focus. And it was in a comic that I saw an ad for the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Art. And I think I was in 9th grade at the time. And I showed it to my parents and was like, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. And they were, they were really supportive. And And, you know, they still wanted me to take the SAT and all that, even though I didn't need it for that school, just in case. So I did. But, you know, in my senior year of high school, contacted the school, got, you know, the brochure sent down, and we looked through it. And, you know, I grew up in Maryland, so it wasn't that far away. And, you know, you interviewed personally with Joe Kubert, either over the phone or in person, and we opted to do it in person because it was only a 4-hour drive. And part of it was because, you know, going 4 hours back then felt like a distance to me. Now I'm like, it's nothing. And, you know, to parents, 4 hours was a good distance away. And myself, I have a 21-year-old, so, and she's at home, but, you know, that's a distance. So they want to see where I'd be living and going to school and stuff. So we all drove up there for the interview, and yeah, rest is history, because I went for the 3 years and
Well, that's
such.
just
So
amazing. You actually got to meet the legend himself in person. That's a big
yeah,
deal, I would think.
well, I was lucky because when I went in, I was supposed to go in the fall of '87. I graduated high school in '87. I was accepted, supposed to go in the fall of '87, but I don't know, probably a few weeks before school started, or it was supposed to start, I just felt like, I think I'd like to just take a year off before going. And part of it was it's a 3-year school. So all my friends that were going to regular colleges for 4 years, I'd still graduate the same time.
Yeah.
So my parents were like, yeah, that's fine. You just have to get a full-time job, or get a job, basically. If you're not just going to lounge around for a year. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I called the school and told them, and they said, not a problem. We'll just reserve a spot for, you know, the fall of 1988. And Joe was still teaching when I went there. He was teaching second and third year students. Um, I don't think he taught first year. I mean, I'm sure at some point he obviously taught first year students, but if I remember right, I think he backed out of doing that just because, um, you know, first year usually started off, like our class started off with like 105 students roughly. And in second year, I think there was maybe 70.
Wow.
And I think Joe just wanted to teach second and third year because, you know,
He
if you
felt they
made
would.
it to second year, it weeded
He
people
felt they would
out.
be more. They would be more dedicated to it after
Yeah.
that first year.
Yeah. So, um, you know, and people would drop out after, I mean, people left after like the first few weeks,
Wow.
you know, and then about halfway through the year, people left. And I think that was about it, because there was a cutoff point. Like, you know, back then, and I don't know how they do it now, but back then it was basically like, okay, if you leave within the first few weeks, you get this much of your tuition back. If you leave then, you get this much. And I
Yeah.
think if you went past the halfway point of the school year, it was, well, if you leave, you don't get anything back. So I think, you know, more people probably took off at the halfway point where they could still get something back,
Yeah.
you know, and then people would just go off all through the, you know, first year and just not come back for the second year, or, you know, and continue. So
So, looking at your art, I mean, who are some of your influences? You know, the guys who made you, develop the way you have the style that you possess. Is there anybody, any in particular artist who like that guy really influenced what I do and how I approach it?
yeah, I mean, growing up, you know, first comic, like I said, Mike Zeck, love Mike Zeck's work. Steve Root, I really liked a lot. Alan Davis, I was a huge fan of. Neil Adams, John Buscema growing up, John
I,
Byrne,
I,
George
I've
Perez.
noticed that a lot of artists say that one of their influences has always been John Buscema. He just seems to be like
Oh
like
yeah.
the go-to guy for a lot of artists. Is like this is where I learned how to do great figure work. This is how I learned how to do great perspective is from John Buscema.
And I think part of that, at least for me, is because, you know, back then, one of the first how-to books, and I didn't get it when it first came out in 1977. I didn't get it until around 82 or 83, but was How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. That was at that time my local library, which was basically not basically, it was a single wide trailer. That was our local library where I grew up, and I could walk to it. And, I'd go there, and in the art section, they had that book. I think they had another cartooning book. I can't remember the name of it, but I did find it in the past decade at a, used bookstore and bought it. But How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way was the only book at that time on how to draw comic books.
It was kind of the comic book Bible.
Yeah, at that time, yeah. So, and it was all John Buscema. So I knew his work anyhow and collected it, and I just loved his work. And then, when I was going to the Kubert School, I think it launched in 1988 or 89, was a book called Justice League Europe that Bart Sears was drawing.
Yes.
And that was the first time I ever saw his work. And it was his first major work. He did work before that, but this was like his first big break, I guess. And I just, I was like, wow, what is this? This has like dynamics of like Neil Adams, but the anatomy is right on point and it's clean. It was different. That book launched after Justice League by Kevin Maguire, which I was also buying, and I really was attracted to because of, I guess, obviously facial expressions Kevin did, and his figure work and such. So Bart stuff kind of had those aspects too. And then in my third year at the Kubert School, when the Kubert School runs from September to May, just like a regular school does.
Yes.
And it's 5 days a week, 8 o'clock to like 2:30, something like that. And it's 2 classes a day. So it wasn't like regular college where it's like, oh, I've got Wednesday off and I've got 3 classes Thursday. Then Friday, I've got 1. No, it was 5 days a week, 2 classes a day, lots of homework, whatever. So in September of 1990, when I showed up for the first day of school and I got my schedule of classes and stuff, a buddy of mine that was a year below me, so in second year, was like, oh, I got Bart Sears as a teacher. And I was like, he's teaching here? And the thing about the Kubert School is there were a few teachers that were basically there year in, year out, and it wasn't a full-time job. They were just the regulars. But then every other, like out of the 3 years I was there, some teachers came in and taught for a year, then were gone. And some came in and maybe taught for 2 years, whatever. So Bart was teaching there. And I was like, what? I got to meet him. I love his work. I mean, at this point, Justice League's been out for probably 10 or 11 issues. And I mean, I was bummed because he was teaching second year students and not third. And I was a third year student. But, it's not a huge school. And one time, within the first couple of weeks of school starting, before classes, I just went into his classroom that he was teaching, like I said, before class started, and just introduced myself and showed him my work. And, basically it's kind of fuzzy now because it's, going to be 35 years ago, but, we just kind of hit it off, and probably, I don't know, within 4 or 5 weeks, he was like, if you want to come hang out, cause he lived pretty close. And he's like, if you want to come out, hang out and stuff, do your homework and whatnot. I'm just sitting there drawing anyhow. So be cool to have the company and whatnot. And I was like, okay. So he kind of took me under his wing and was a mentor to me. So besides, you know, having Joe Kubert as a teacher and other great instructors, I was able to go over to Bart's place a few times a week, watch him draw, ask him questions. When I was working on assignments, I'd show them to him and he'd throw tracing paper over it and be like, well, you could tweak this or fix this or whatever. And, I mean, that was just great. I mean, it was invaluable. lessons. And then in March was it March? It was February or March of 91. He was going up to DC to take some, drop some pages off because the Cuber School is like 45 minutes away from New York City. And he's like, if you got some samples and you want to go, and he knew I had samples, but he's like, if you want to go with me, I could introduce you to some editors. You could show them your work. And I was like, yeah. So, went up to DC. He introduced me to some editors. I showed him, the four-page samples I had. And, I got critiqued, each editor. I didn't speak to like a ton. I probably talked to like 3 editors, and they all had different stuff to say. I'm sure there was some overlap with what they said, but each one, I can't remember the exact notes, but I can remember each one did have little differences to their eye. And, they basically said, work up some new samples and, come back in a few weeks. And I was like, okay. And I took it, literal. So I did. I worked up new samples. And when Bart went up, because he would go up pretty much once a week. So when he was going back in a couple of weeks, I tagged along again and talked to the same editors. And I remember one of them was like, yeah, I mean, they were all impressed that I came back like in a couple of weeks, like they said,
with some
because I'm
fresh
sure they
sample.
tell other people that. But, I didn't know it then. I didn't even know what OCD was back then, but I am OCD. And so when they say work up new stuff, come back in a couple of weeks, I was like, okay. so anyhow, a couple of editors were like, yeah, I think your stuff's good and it's there. I just don't have anything. And then Mike Carlin, who I was talking to, he was one that said that. And he was sharing an office with a guy named Dan Raspler. And he said, hey, Dan, can you look at this guy's stuff? And Dan was like, sure. So Dan looked at it and was like, you want to do an inventory job for me? And I was like, definitely. And an inventory job, for those that don't know, because they don't do them anymore, is basically the editor would have a whole 22-page book, one-off story, so it's not continued or anything, penciled, inked, lettered, maybe even colored in their flat file. So if the book was in jeopardy of making the printer, they could just go, no problem, we'll just slide this one in instead. And this is before previews catalogs, before the internet. It was back in the time when you'd read a comic, it'd say to be continued or whatever, and you just wait and had no idea what was going to happen next month. You wouldn't see anything. So I said, okay. I said, I graduate in May. So I had like 2 months to go of school. I said, but don't worry, I can fit it in. And Dan was like, no. He goes, I want you to finish school and not be distracted. Let's keep in touch and let me know a couple weeks before you graduate so I can make sure the script's ready for when you graduate. And I was like, okay. So that's what I did. And I basically graduated May 15th or 16th, something like that. And, moved back home into my parents' house and had the script so I could start drawing within a week. So
Now, do you know if that story ever got used?
no, it didn't. In fact, it was about a decade later. So this was 1991. A decade later, I was working at CrossGen and I got a FedEx from DC, a box. And I wasn't expecting anything because, I'm working at CrossGen. I'm not working for them or anything. And no email or anything like, hey, we're sending you something. This box just shows up. And I opened it up and it was my artwork to that 22-page job.
Wow.
So, and I only did pencils on it, and it wasn't lettered. It wasn't inked. Obviously it wasn't colored. So basically, instead of spending the money to pay for those extra steps, the thought was keep it in the drawer, and if we need to use it, we'll have enough time to get it inked, lettered, and colored.
Yeah.
but there's no reason to spend the money to do that if we never have to use it. So yeah, so like it showed up, 11 years later at those offices, and I'll be honest, I opened the box. I was like, oh, I haven't seen this in forever. And I looked at every page, put it back in the box, taped it back up, wrote on the outside of the box with the big Sharpie, Suicide Squad inventory job pencils. That box has not been opened since 2001.
Wow.
It's in my closet.
Are you ashamed of it, or is it, is it some
No,
secret? You
there's just
just
no reason to open it. I mean, I got it, so it's good. It's fine. I mean, I'm not ashamed. I'm not. There was probably a time where I guess, like most artists, you get better as you grow. And so I'm sure back then I probably looked at it and was horrified, because it was my first job 10 years later. But, I learned pretty quick that as long as you do your best effort or put your best effort forth when you're doing the job, it doesn't matter 10 years later how I feel about it because I did the best I could at the time.
yeah.
So there's no point in me looking at something even 3 years ago I did, and if I see how I could do it better now, beating myself up over it because I didn't know that then. And I did the best I could then. So,
No, that's a great attitude. I mean, a lot of everyone always says that artists are usually their worst critics. And to have that kind of attitude, I think would probably help be beneficial to a lot of artists to, like, just understand it. I did the best that I could with the skills I had attained at that moment, and though I'm much better now, that's why I'm better, is because I kept pushing forward from where I
yeah.
was. And so I think that's a great attitude to have. I don't see that a whole lot with a lot of artists. They're usually very critical of what they did in their early days. Like actors who like hang their heads in shame and like, oh, I can't believe I did that role, because like I was a hungry actor. I just had to get out there. I had to get my name out there. And they don't think about like, well, that's what you had to do to get there
Sure.
and to get to where you are now. And they don't look at it that way. They look at it like, oh, it was just such a shame. And so I
Well,
see
it
a lot of that
is.
with the artists too. And yet here it is. You're like the exact opposite of that. That's very interesting to me that you take that approach of, I did the best I could then, and I'm much better now, but I was doing the best I could then. So this is why I'm so much better now. And that's a great attitude. I was very surprised to hear that.
Well, I think it's, you always have to keep striving to get better. And I do. I look at it, and every artist is different. But for me, in those first few years, in my eye, I can see from, 1991 when I started in June to just a year later, I can see a big difference. And then 2 years later, a big difference and whatever. I think it was probably when I was in the business for about 10, 11 years where I could still, my eye, I could see a difference from like month to month, year to year, whatever.
Yeah.
But it just slows down because even now I'm still trying to get better and improve, and I can see subtle differences, but now they're subtle. They're not big like they were
Yeah.
because you know um you're just learning and stuff, and you do make those leaps and bounds to where now it's kind of like sculpting, when you first take that big piece of clay, that big piece of marble where you're going to sculpt this 10-foot statue. The first month or so, you're probably like, oh my God, I'm not getting anywhere, you know. And
Yeah.
then, 6 months later, when you're 80% done with it, a week, 5 days go by and you're like, you can see the difference, but somebody that might come over and just look at it might not, because you're now really just refining down the details and stuff.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's kind of how I look at it now. So I'm still striving to always be better and experiment and, play with new things, storytelling wise, if I can. I've also kind of settled into, this is how I like to do things, compared to, there was a time where I was like, oh, that guy's doing this. Maybe I should try that. ooh, that guy's doing layouts like this. Oh, I'll try that, to where I'm like, nope, I like doing layouts this way. And it's not that I'm not trying to learn and get better. It's just it's your style, you
Yeah,
know?
you've defined your own style in
Yeah.
your own mind, and so you're like, I don't need to
Yeah.
try to experiment as much because I have this definitive idea of what my art should be.
Right. And, I now it's funny, like you said, with actors and movies and stuff, I still don't like, when something I do goes to print and I actually get it. So, like kor-drath, the book I'm doing now, when the first one, we got it back from the printer and we had to do fulfillment. At this point, or at that point when I got the physical copy from the printer, I've looked at these pages besides the various stages from white paper to getting the colors in and um having to, make color notes for the colorist, to the lettering, making notes for the letterer and stuff, that I do obviously sit down and go through it page by page and give it like one read through. But I pretty much just do it that one time and that's it, because I've just seen it so much. I do want to see how it printed, but once I've seen how it printed and read it, I'm good. Uh, at conventions, I used to, when people would come up with stuff for me to sign that was even 3 or 4 years old, not to mention now 30 years old, I used to just basically sign it and go, here you go, thanks. Now, if they're not in a rush, I'll be like, oh, can I flip through this? Because I do kind of, if it's, shoot, even something I did 8 years ago, it's been so long since I've looked at it that it really is looking at it with such a fresh eye
Yeah.
that it's like looking at somebody else's work. It's, for the first time. So anything that I might not have liked about it right then, because like any artist, I'll get a page done, and right after it's done, the next day, I'll probably, if I want, I'm sure I can look at it and be like, oh, I could have done this or I could have done this. But, you, once again, do the best you can and keep moving. And that was a Joe Kubert thing too. Joe would say, look, do the best you can in the time you have, move forward. If you see a mistake, don't dwell on it, remember it so you can fix it next time.
Yeah.
Because, you'd never move forward, because I could look at a page I did 2 days ago and be like, oh, I could do this. And then I do it. And then I go, oh, I could do this. And then I do it. Next thing you know, 2 weeks are gone by and I haven't gotten any more work done.
Not
So,
having perspective.
yeah. And it's a commercial business when it comes down to it as well. It's nice that I have more time than I did working for Marvel and DC, working on, my own stuff. So I can put the extra time into it, but it still has to get done.
Well, that's one thing I've found a lot of artists who've gone into the crowdfunding game say they like best about it is the fact that they have the actual time to do the art more in the way that they themselves would like it to be, that they couldn't always do on a monthly grind in the mainstream. You got
Yeah.
that deadline of doom, dreaded deadline of doom always on you, and it's like, I
Mhm.
sometimes, I just ain't got the time. I just got to crank it out. Whereas here, I can take my time and do it right and make sure it looks the best, most professional way I can make it look, so that it reflects what I want it to be, visually and thematically and all that. And they really like that freedom that they get
Right.
from doing it that way.
Yep. Yep. Totally. I mean, right now, I basically, my schedule since I've been doing the crowdfunding thing is to pencil and ink 2 pages a week. Uh, when I was when I was working on Stormwatch for DC, in like 2008 or 9, I wasn't supposed to ink the book. Mark Farmer was going to, but then Mark had to bow out. And the editor was like, oh, Mark has to bow. And this is after we did like a promotional piece together and stuff.
Yeah.
So I knew what the inks were going to look like. And I've always loved Mark Farmer's work. So he had to bow out. And the editor was like, do you have any other ideas before I go think of some whatever for an anchor? And I just said, well, what if I do it? And I said, look, if I pencil it, like we talked about, I would do 5 pages a week. if I ink it, I can get you 4 a week of pencils and inks, which will still save you time. And he was like, oh, okay, let's do that. So I was doing 4 pages a week then of pencils and inks on Stormwatch. So
Wow. That's crazy. Like that's like a page every other day. That's crazy. That's a
yeah,
crazy schedule.
it was it was basically a 6-day week. You know, it might bleed in. It probably bled into Sunday mornings, but I know it never really took a full Sunday to do the 4. So it was probably 6.5 days a week doing that stuff.
That
So
that is a grind though. That is a grind. And like I said, that's what I think a lot of artists like in the freedom of crowdfunding is that grind isn't on them like that, like it used to be for a lot of them. And
yeah,
especially for some of the older guys who like, not that their work isn't any good, but like, they just don't have it like they did when they were 20, and it's just
right.
kind of harder to hit that grind of grinding out 4 pages in 6 days when you're, 59 than when you're 29.
Yeah, yeah. And once again, every artist is just everybody's different, which, you know, I mean, it sounds so like no duh, no shit. Everybody's different. We all know that. But for me at least, I always kind of, and I don't know if it was because of, the Kubert school and the training there. And I don't mean it in a negative way, but like, Joe was like, you should be able to do this and you should be able to do that. And I was like, okay, this is what I have to be able to do. And it took me a while to go, well, that's coming from Joe's perspective, and Joe can do that, but not everybody can. Like, I knew when I
Everybody
got
isn't
in,
Joe. Everybody
yeah,
isn't Joe.
right. And I knew when I got into the business, for instance, just from reading interviews, that John Byrne would do 3 pages a day, right, of pencils. And I remember getting in the business thinking, and I was drawing 1 page a day. And I thought to myself, well, I just started. I thought, well, probably in 3 or 4 years after doing it every day, I'll probably be able to do 2 or 3 a day like that. Cause I assume that's what Byrne was like. He probably started at 1 and then you just get faster as you go along. And for a long time, and that never happened, by the way. For the long, so for the longest time, I would kind of, interior, uh, inside monologue, beat myself up and be like, oh, why aren't you doing 3 a day? You've been doing this for 10 years now. And it's just like, that's just Byrne. I mean, that's just, everybody's different. Jack Kirby was doing this.
Yep.
Today, if you were like, I just want nice, tight, full pencils from you, it would actually, the first page I did would probably take me longer than a day because I haven't done full pencils for somebody else to ink in almost a decade. So just getting back into that mindset is difficult
Yeah.
because I don't do full pencils for myself, you know,
Well, that's because since you're the
because I'm
artist
inking
of
it.
those pencils, yeah, you already know where you want to go with it. Say if that's something
Right.
I've learned from others is like what was it? I did my first episode of this show with Dan Lawless, and he said that the best you can hope for in the mainstream is to get an inker who understands your pencils and can take them
Right.
where you want them to go. He goes, that's the best you can hope for. He goes, once in a while you might get someone who can elevate it. He goes, but a lot more times than not, you get people who don't understand them and the inks ruin them. He goes, the best you can hope for is to get someone who understands your pencils and can take it where it needs to go. And so he goes, when you're inking yourself, who knows better where you want to go than you do?
Right. Right.
Well, speaking of inking and going where you want to go, let's move on with the show here. We'll get some art going. And as you guys know, the way this works is I have a piece by Andy, and Andy has a piece he's kept for himself of his own art. And we're going to showcase these to you. So you
Well,
get to see some art from
so
me and some art from Andy.
so the funny thing is, um, about 1995, so in the business for roughly 4 years, I stopped selling my art. So when you were like, pick something, I'm like, that's not as easy as it sounds because, and this is no joke, in my closet, I've got these plastic tubs that fit, the artwork
Yep. And
laying
they're all
flat.
full.
And if I go stand next to those plastic tubs, they're taller than I am because I stopped selling my stuff, like I said, in like 1995. And I had an art dealer, and I basically called him up and said, "Give me all my art back. I don't want to sell it anymore." So there's stuff of mine out there.
You're trying to be the next Walt Simonson. That's what you're trying to do. Walt keeps all his art too. He's just like everywhere. There's stacks of art everywhere. And it's just like, you can't take it with you. It's
Joe Kubert did too. Joe was the guy at the school saying,
I've never understood artists who've kept all that. Like, if you kept it like when you're younger, I understand you're keeping it. Maybe I want to hold on to it. It's my golden nest egg. I can sell some stuff off here and there as I get older to pay for, medical expenses or whatever. That's how I can take care of that. It's like my little, my nest egg. But like Walt is, he's not young, and it's like,
oh yeah,
what are you holding on to all of it for? What are you going to create the Walt Simonson, comic art library or something? What is going to go with all this
stuff? So with Walt, somebody as popular as him that has all that, and Walt's in his 70s, I would assume whenever he finally says, kind of like Byrne has, "I'm done. I just want to sketch for fun, not put anything out." I know nothing about his finances, but I would assume he'll start selling that stuff, and honestly, he could just live on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, but he's not doing that yet. I'm like, how much longer are you going to wait?
Right, and like somebody was asking me this. I was having a conversation with somebody about this in Kentucky. Actually, this past weekend, I was at a show in Kentucky. Oh, I was talking to Riley Brown, the artist Riley Brown, great guy. And he asked me, I told him that because I have a portfolio. I take the cons, but it's not interior pages. It's stuff I do basically for fun. That I'm like, what? It's because I do it for fun and I've never been paid for it. I don't mind selling it, but the interior stuff, I'm like, well, I've already been paid and I kind of like it. But, so my thought is, I was telling him, I said, I turned 55 on Tuesday. So when I was talking to him, I said, I turned 55 in a couple of days. And I just kind of have this number in my head of like, somewhere in another decade, like so 65, 66, I'll start liquidating a lot of this stuff behind me and probably start selling art. Because it's just, I don't know. It's just this number I have in my head where it's like that. Maybe it's because my parents, when they retired, they downsized and got rid of stuff. And that's just, I don't know, something that's in my head, like we'll downsize and get rid of stuff.
Like I said, it is the way of the world. You can't take it with you. So it's like, it's going to have to all go at some point.
Yeah. And I tell my wife, if something ever happens to me, in regards to books and comics, she knows who to talk to. So she doesn't just have a yard sale and lose lots of money. And in regards to my artwork, she knows who to talk to. And I said, or you could have a bonfire. I don't care because I won't be here. So do with it what you will.
Well, we're going to do with what I will, because this is the piece I have of you, Andy. And I got this very recently, in fact, because I've noticed there, like you said, there's not a whole lot of your published stuff that is out there. So when I saw this come up, I'm like, man, I better grab this because I might never see a really cool Andy Smith piece like this again.
I'm so nervous right now because I have no idea what I have no idea what it could be.
Well, here it is right here. Let's boot it up and share it.
I hope it's not something I want back. Oh, I actually wouldn't mind having that back. Damn it.
That's from the Exo Man of War Iron Man in Heavy Metal #1, page 10. And like I said, I just picked this up recently.
Oh.
We'll big it up. I
so
love.
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, so this is a job I penciled and inked. This is right around the time I stopped selling stuff because obviously that was out there. So in hindsight, I should have kept it because I did the pencils and inks, which means I would have the whole book of art. So congratulations.
Hey, all right. I win one for once. All right. No, but what I love about this page, and I like how you framed the panels, like is it like the utter chaos of like what superheroes are. I mean, just the action and the drama of it, because there's so much fast movingness and the powers and the action, and this kind of gets at it. And you got the close up here of Mr. Hyde about to smash somebody, and then just a quick little circles here with Iron Man grabbing him, and then he's flying, and then we get to the main image right down here, and I just love that. The Melter staring up in like shock and awe, and Iron Man just standing there with like the classic hero pose, the hands on the hips.
Yep,
And
he's
I like
telling
that
him something.
you even paid attention to something that some guys might not, like with the shadows, like you can see like with this Melter, it connects to him because he's on the ground, but Iron Man is hovering, so you can see there's this big gap right here between him and his shadow because he's in the air, and I just love that angle. And again, this is just classic Andy Smith to me. That the exaggerated, physicality. I mean, the Melter looking like he's from like Beachbody, buff. Just hilarious with that build, like a Greek god or something. And I liked how you handled the armor. I've always thought that the best person to do the armor in Iron Man ever has been Bob Layton. No one can get the sheen.
Yeah, Bob's great.
Yeah, no one can get the sheen on metal quite the way Bob Layton does, but like you get pretty close here, I think. I mean, with these like great shadow lines and the way they curve and meld like all around, and I just love that. And I like the even fact that you even did a little funny thing here, putting Stark's name on the armor as if somebody wouldn't know who Iron Man is working for, because I gotta make sure people know who it is. That's just hilarious. But I just love this dynamic. I love this shot right here. To me, this is like superhero comics 101. The bigness of it, the boldness of it, the gravitas of what superheroes are supposed to be. I said right after having had Mr. Hyde taking a fly here, just grabs him. You don't even show him throwing him. You see him flying through the air with the blast lines. You know what that means, and I just love that. Again, just it almost had like a manga feel with these panels up here with those blast lines and this stuff right here. Then it's just so perfect. And then to come right on in with, here I come to save the day. I mean, you can almost hear it as you're looking at the art. So I was
and that's, I mean, I was going for a little chaoticness with the panel, the diagonals and angles and stuff because of what's going on. And, like you said, with the shadows, if I didn't do the shadows, then it falls into the category of why is Iron Man, so big? Because, it's one of those things, since he is hovering, he's not going to be hovering lying on his back, right? I mean, he could, but that would be kind of dumb for this story. So he's hovering basically in a, standing type pose, hero pose. But to show that, you got to drop the shadow below him onto the floor to get the point across. So, look, I'm glad it's in a good home. It is one of my favorite pages. This is one of my favorite jobs from that time period because, going back to what we were talking about earlier is
1996. That's when this was 96.
Yeah. So, going back to earlier, it's what I could do in 1996, the best I could do. I haven't seen it in so long that it is really looking at it with a fresh eye going, that's kind of cool, So,
well, one thing I found really interesting about it is you can see that there's the title and the number and all that, like where it is on, but it's been taped on. You can see right here from a smaller piece. So were you using smaller artboard for this for some reason, or
I was using a little bit smaller artboard, and the reason it's taped on is because I was either penciling on just regular Bristol that you draw on, or I was penciling on copy paper, and the paper that's inked on is, I believe it's layout bond paper, which takes I was using like microns, whatever microns were back then. Yeah, they were microns. They had those back then. So I was using like microns and stuff back then. And so it's archival ink, as you can tell. And the bond paper it's really good. It holds marker really well because that's really what it's for doing comps and layouts with, color markers. But I didn't have to use a light box. So I could lay that paper over my pencils and ink it, and then I didn't have to worry about erasing pencils or anything. So because the bond paper was so thick, it's not super thin, it's about the same as like copy paper. I would tape it down to the board because this is also back. Actually, I'm trying to remember. I think we were scanning this stuff because I was sharing a studio with Bart at the time up in Syracuse still. And I think we were scanning the stuff ourselves and then, emailing the pages into Valiant for them to, get colored and stuff. But it was still just one of those things where even if it was, the pages never left our hands, but they were still, it's like copy paper. It was just too flimsy. That's why we draw in Bristol in the first place, is because it's heavy. So I figured, we just tape it down, or I would just tape it down to the Bristol. So
I just thought I just wondered why that was, because I've never
mm-hmm.
seen that done before. I mean, I've seen guys use smaller Bristol pages and things that aren't the size of 11 by 17 comic page, but I've never seen one where they taped another piece of like art type board onto one like that. I'd never seen that before. That was something completely new to me. I was like, wow, that's interesting how that was done, because I'd never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, and I've got all the I know I've got all the roughs somewhere to that stuff. And when I say somewhere, I mean there's a big closet behind me.
It's in one of those
And
tubs. It's one of those tubs where if they fell over, they would crush you. Yes.
I don't know if it's in one of those tubs or another one, like just a totally different one. Because so I have, before scanning, when I first broke into comics, and this was something basically I learned from Bart, is, before he would turn his pencil pages into DC Comics, he would photocopy them for a couple reasons. One, so he have an archive of his pencils because they were going to be inked by somebody else. And two, if something happened to the original pencils and they were like, oh my God, we lost a few pages, he could be like, well, here's copies. So give those to the inker and figure it out. Or if they were like, well, we'll pay you to relight box it, he could just light box from his pencil copies.
Yeah.
So I would, until scanning, which wasn't probably until I think 97, I started scanning stuff. So for those first 6 years, I would make photocopies full size, 11 by 17
Yep.
of every page I did, and 8.5 by 11. And I
Wow.
have copies of everything up until 1997. I penciled and inked in a tub back there. So,
Wow. Yeah, and again, like I love the force perspective,
yeah.
and again, and like I said, the anatomy is just really what gets me, because like this goes back again to something I spoke about with Dan Lawless when I did this show with him. I said, he said something very interesting to me that I never thought about. He goes, there's a lot of people out there who like want to try to break the rules on things, like I'll do it this way, I'll do it differently than everybody else, I'll do it like this, I'll do it like that. But they don't have the concept of understanding the rules. He goes, you got to understand the rules before you can
Yep.
break the rules. See, because if you
Yep.
break the rules without understanding them, you're going to have, like you said, chaos. It's not going to make any sense. But like, see, so like you with this here, yeah, he's overinflated in size, he's bigger, but it makes sense because you understand the anatomy of the human that way. And so since you understand human anatomy, you can then play with it in these ways to make them bigger, to make them, more elongated, to make them more,
Right.
menacing, however you want to do it. And by understanding the concept of how the body works and how anatomy works, you're able to break the rules and bring in the extra dimension that comics are so well known for.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, you definitely should. You should learn the rules before you can break them. And because then you break them with a certain level of, uh, yeah, first word that comes to mind is intelligence, but you're breaking them, but you're breaking them so it still works. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Like someone I
and
would,
yeah, no, I mean, I
someone I
totally
would
agree with Dan on that.
Well, someone
100%.
I would name for this way would be Bill Sienkiewicz. If you look at his very
Yeah.
early stuff in the very early '80s, where he's trying to like say more like ape Neil Adams, you can
Yep.
see the classic figure work. But then when he goes into his more like you know uh, surrealist style, shall we say, that he did later on, like on New Mutants and stuff,
Hmm.
he's breaking those rules, but yet it still comes across as what it is. You don't look at it and go, I don't even know what I'm looking at. You're saying, oh, I know what this is, even though he's totally breaking the rules on the anatomy of how things go and how things line up sometimes, but yet it still works because he had
Right.
that understanding of how it does actually work.
Right. Yep. 100%. I love
And
Bill's stuff.
so we'll go over here and you'll see here, this is the published version of the page with
Oh
all
yeah.
the dialogue
Oh,
on
that
it.
is so saturated.
Yes, it is.
God. So oversaturated. Oh my God.
But like what I like that though, because then when you go back and you do look at, say, the original, you'll see things in it sometimes that you might have missed because of that oversaturated coloring.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but like the way his cloak here is flapping in the wind, and when you go over here, you don't really see it as much.
Right.
It's
Well,
less
because
noticeable,
of, yeah, it blends
because the
together.
colors are
Yeah.
so heavy and so power overpowering that you don't notice like some of the finer details that were in it. So I actually enjoy that about it sometimes. That's what I love about comic art is you see things sometimes that you never knew were there because you were so maybe inundated by the actual published version that you didn't see them before.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But now we've done my piece. Now we're going to move along over to Andy's piece, and it's a classic, another classic here. With you can see the exaggerated anatomy here with cover to Green Lantern 61 from 1994.
Yep.
And
I drew the interiors to that as well.
yes, he did.
Um, it wasn't anywhere near my first cover. Not even my first cover for DC. And I'm one of those guys. I haven't done a ton of covers. Usually generally if I draw the book, I do the cover, but I've never done, well, I don't want to say never because then somebody will go, no, you did here, but it's not coming to mind a cover for a book I didn't draw. And the thing is, like, I like doing interiors. I don't get me wrong, I like doing covers, but I like doing panel pages. So anyhow, I chose that one. Like I told you, a lot of my stuff is in tubs. That's hanging on my wall, so that was easy. Uh, that's why there's a little glare to it because the original is framed, hanging on a wall, and it's one of those things where would I frame that today? Probably not. But when I got the artwork back, because this was when you would mail stuff into the company, when I got the artwork back, I took it to a framer and had it professionally framed, and it's never been out of it. So, but I love Green Lantern, so I was thrilled to be able to draw a Green Lantern cover for a book I actually, I got to draw as well. I love Gil Kane, so I remember doing the sketch and being like, oh, I want to do one of those Gil Kane upside down figures coming at you type things. So that was the thought going into Kyle's figure getting hit by Calabac.
Well,
And then, Dark's,
what
go
I'm
ahead.
noticing here is the difference, like in the way you seem to approach the male physique versus the female. Like where here you're definitely accentuating the masculine properties, whereas with the
Sure.
female you can see you're definitely accentuating the feminine properties. And I think that's another very interesting thing to note is how some artists they try to if you see their figures all line up very close together. Like you wouldn't notice a lot of difference between a male and a female figure, but yet in yours it's extremely pronounced. Like, yes, this is the male and this is the female.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just, I don't know. I guess that goes back to influences and stuff and what I liked growing up. And, one of the things when it comes to drawing women, especially on the face, is the less lines, the better, because e- even if you do a dimple, on the woman's face, which, women have when they smile and stuff, some do, and some have a cleft chin and stuff. If you don't do it right, it can look so wrong and make them look old and stuff. So unless it's a character like MJ who has, dimples and that you're supposed to do, it's better just to go, I'll leave them out. Or, practice it. The thing is, you want to do practice stuff and experiment more in a sketchbook and not on a paying job because and I know I've talked to other artists about this and some agree, some disagree, but I've always looked at it like when I get hired for a job or when I got hired for a job, they were hiring me off of a job I previously did. So if that's what they hired me for, I'm not going to go, you know what? I think I'm going to draw this job in this style because that's not why they hired me. So, but yeah, no, this was a fun cover. It's got the logo. I mean, it's got everything that's not on original art anymore because this was before scanning. This is when they
Yep.
took, stat photographs of everything. So it's got the logo on a layer. It's got the hand where they took a stat of it. Somebody in production cut it out, pasted it on the layer or the layer with the logo. So if I lift it up,
The
his hand
overlay.
is still there.
Yep.
You know, it's just it's got all that cool stuff. Is it
One
my favorite?
one
Well,
thing I've
I mean,
noticed
it's
about
not
a
my
lot of your
favorite air. Go ahead.
one of the things I've noticed about a lot of your work is you've done a whole lot with cosmic type characters. Green Lantern, Silver Surfer. The First, Exo Man War. A lot of characters very very influential in like the cosmic scheme of things. Here you got like in this one here you got Calabac from
Yeah.
Kirby's Fourth World. I mean, there's all this stuff. Do you have like a certain affinity for the cosmic stuff, or is it just do you think it was just something that just by coincidence you just happened to be the guy they kept coming to say, hey, keep doing all our cosmic stuff?
No, I mean, I like it. Sure. I mean, I loved growing up. Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel, which was all stuff that I bought, as back issues. But I love that stuff. I love those characters. And I mean, this was just a coincidence that it was Calabac and Darkseid's in the inside of the book as well. It was just coincidence because it was a one-off issue that they needed to have done. So the Silver Surfer stuff, maybe it played into the fact that I was working on Quasar. And, when they asked me to do the Surfer stuff is when I left Quasar. If it wasn't for that, I would have stayed on Quasar. But, another better, uh, I think it was a better opportunity doing that Surfer stuff arose and they asked me to do it. So I was like, okay. Um, I don't know. I mean, I love the stuff. I mean, First Man's a cosmic type guy. He's on Earth, but he's from another planet and all that stuff. So
And there's
I
the
just I like that type of
Mars
stuff.
Attacks Image crossover you did. I mean, that was
Yeah.
crazy stuff there. I mean, so
Yeah.
like I said, it's just interesting to me sometimes when you see what an artist has done, and then like because like I'm looking at your new book now, your kor-drath, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, and that's
Sure.
like so much the opposite of like so much of what your work has been up to this point. Like I said, you were like doing a lot of the cosmic guys, these big, larger than life sort of space beings and stuff, and aliens and all that kind of stuff. And then here it is, you're going like the entire opposite direction. You're going, well, now I'm going to go sword and sorcery and go that route and with this. And I just thought it was kind of interesting that how your career seemed to be so much in one direction and then you just flipped it 180 almost to something else. And I just think that's kind of an interesting thing about how artists are, because you always wonder sometimes when they've done the works they've done, is it because they really wanted to do them or was it just a job? And
Right.
I just find it just was kind of curious if like since you've done so much cosmic stuff, if that was like something you really want to do, like I really like doing the cosmic stuff, or it's just like now these were just jobs. I just need to get the paycheck. I need to get the work out there and get my name out there. And now that I'm doing my stuff, I'm going to do what I really want to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of both. It's a freelance life. So if a job comes along and I was available when they asked, I'd do it. But I also turn down stuff. I when I was at Marvel early on, they needed an issue of Warlock done, and it was during the one of the Infinity,
Crossovers.
crossovers. And there I was like, okay, well, when do you need it? And they were like, oh, we need it in 2 weeks. And I was like, well, I can't draw a book in 2 weeks. And they were like, well, can you do in 2 weeks? And I said, well, I could probably do layouts for the whole book in 2 weeks because I can do those faster than full pencils. And they're like, okay, do that. So I did, and I was happy with the layouts. And I can't remember who did the finishes on it, but it was a rush job, not only on my end, but obviously whoever did the finishes, it was get it done, get it done. So it's one of those jobs that I can look back on it now and be like, but it's not anywhere near a favorite. I didn't like the finishes, but once again, that's what happens when you just do breakdowns. Whoever's doing the finishes can do basically whatever they want. So, but the key takeaway was I'm never doing this again. And what I mean is you're only as good as your last job. So I can sit there till I'm blue in the face and say, yeah, but they said they needed it in 2 weeks. And guys, I only did finishes on it. Even though editors should understand all that when you talk to them, you'd be surprised. People would look at that. And I'm not saying I know this for a fact with that specific job. I just know from talking to editors and stuff how they think. Even if I was like, yeah, but it says in the credits, I just did layouts, breakdowns. You can't hold me to account for the finishes on it, the rendering style and stuff. It's just one of those things that they look at a book, they go, oh, who did this art? Oh, Andy did. And they just flip through it and they're like, oh, boop, to the side. And it's like, yeah, but I just, there's just no explaining out of it. And I'm just like, okay, you're only as good as your last job. And I don't want to have to jam stuff out if I don't have to. So pretty much after that, if somebody was like, yeah, we need this and we need it in this amount of time, I just tell them, yeah, I can't do that. Or I tell them, and I've done this where it's like, well, I can do 10 pages in that amount of time. And they'd be like, okay. And they just get somebody else to do the other 10. And I wouldn't have to rush it. So when the book came out, I could still be proud of what I did.
Oh, this is probably part of the reason, like I said, that Dan Lawless was saying, like, what you hope for is an inker that understands your pencil, so that way you don't have to worry about situations like that.
Right. So, like on Mars Attacks Image, I did breakdowns on that, but Bill Sienkiewicz was the finisher, so I knew I was in good hands. So, and it came out fantastic. Yep, there it is.
And then here's the published version. Not
Yes,
quite,
not
not quite
besides the
overpowering
great,
as the piece I had. The colors, they're not quite as overpowering.
no, I mean, honestly, besides, and I remember when it came out, I was still like, what's with the green guys in the background? Because they're the dude that's in the foreground holding Donna Troy. And I'm like, I get that they're in the background, but why would you just color them in a monochromatic green instead of just using a smaller like percentage of what the character colors actually are that would push them into the background?
Yeah.
Like I look at that and I'm like, those guys are just a distraction to me. They don't look like they're in the background. But whatever. Overall, when I saw it, I was like, nah, it works for me. It's cool.
It's a 30-year-old job. I don't think we have to worry about it too much hurting your
Oh, no.
your
It's like
credibility
I
there.
said, it's still something I look at and I go, oh, this was cool. This was fun when I was drawing it. I had got a kick out of it. And I think they pulled the shot of Thanos. They pulled a shot of Darkseid from the inside of it. And I think they used it for a trading card or something way back.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
Nice. Well, that'll about do it for the art portion here. So what we'll do now is the show portion, and then here we're going to share the screen once more with a couple things here. So you guys, if you want to get in contact with Andy, you want to see what he's up to, well, one of the ways you can do that is to head on over to his YouTube channel right here, Comic Artist.
Oh, there
Andy
you go.
Smith. And he's
That's
got
right.
lots of great videos here. He does movie reviews and comic reviews and little time lapse drawing tutorial stuff. You see here these Invisible Woman, and then there's Titania, Jean Grey from X Factor, Power Girl, Black Cat. I'm sensing a theme here, Andy.
Well, so I do. So the viewers get a handle on it. One, subscribe, but two, I do a time lapse drawing every week that goes live, not live, but it drops at 8 a.m. on Thursday mornings, Eastern time, every Thursday. I do, and it's a time lapse. These drawings take me probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, but I record it with my phone, time lapse. So it's about 5-6 minutes, when you see it. And for the longest time, because I do these for myself. So I drew like the leader of the Silverhawks you know. A lot of times I'll just pick characters that I like because I'm the one, I'm just drawing it for myself. And then I realized I should do more women. So uh it's been a while, but I've been doing, I think if you just go back, it's a lot of every week I'm just trying to do a different woman. But then when I did the Invisible Woman, I was like, well, now I got to do the whole Fantastic Four. I just can't do her. So that's why it's the
So
rest
I
of,
guess that means next week we can expect the Human Torch.
yes, you can.
But there
Yes,
you
you
go.
can. And then,
So you get to see Andy, and these are like the kind of drawings you said that you take to the shows in a portfolio that people can buy, so they can get some actual art by you.
yeah, they're all, I have this pad of paper that is 5.5 by 7. And that's the size of all these drawings. And I probably have 30 of them or more that whenever I go to a show, I take them with me. And honestly, I sell them, it really depends, what I sell them for, mood I'm in, who the character is, but it's cheaper. It's probably the cheapest original art you're going to get from me because of the size, and it's a single character. And then I have, larger stuff, 11 by 17 and stuff like that as well. But a lot of it's this stuff. So
there you go, folks.
and then, yeah, movie reviews and so forth.
Make sure to head on over here. Andy Smith, comic artist, right here on YouTube. You can see he's got almost, wow, you're nearing 4,000 subscribers.
Yep.
You should giving Aaron Lepresti a run for his money. He just broke 4,000. So you got to get him up there. We got to get him up there, folks. We got to get Andy up there so he can compete with Aaron Lepresti.
That's right.
We got to get him up over that 4K mark, so we can do that. Let's do that. But again, that's just one way you can contact Andy and get together with him. But then, of course, we have the best way to do that, which I'll bring up here in a moment. Yeah, just a little slow. Computers doesn't want to work with me as much. It's saying, "Hey, it's been a long day. Time to shag off." But before we shag off here, we're gonna there it is, Kor-drath, The Reckoning.
Oh yeah,
Volume 2, The Awakening, and this is Andy's own creation. And so what we'll do here is we'll just play the video here.
Oh, nice.
An ancient evil awakened to slaughter his family. A mythical quest was revealed. Treacherous perils await. Lovers bound by destiny. Darkness gathers as a new game begins. One man's rage will shape worlds. Kor-drath, The Awakening. Only on Indiegogo. Back it now!
I love it. It's get to the Indiegogo. Do it now.
Yes.
But yeah, this is Kor-drath. This is Andy's sword and sorcery book. Here you can see you got some art here. We got showcased here. Everything, you can get the everything collection here of all the stuff.
That's right.
And of course, we got here the covers to the book.
Yep.
Got that classic cover here of Andy's. Then we got the retro version. And then we have the Bud Root Sexy book. So, I mean, that right there, I mean, if that's not enough to get someone to buy it, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I know. And that cover, if you back the Reckoning with his cover that he did, that cover, if you put them together, they make one image, which we made into a poster. So you'll see that down below.
Yes, we'll
So.
get down here some nice pages, some great art. And there's the black and white versions. And then an RPG module. And wow, you don't see that. You don't see anyone else doing that. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's the second one. We did one for the first campaign. My buddy Dennis, who is the writer and stuff, he's huge into Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games ever since first edition back in the 80s. So he wrote RPG module for the first book, and this is the second module. It's a totally different story. So honestly, even if you're not into playing the game, you could get this and just read a totally different kor-drath story. So
nice. Then we got some t-shirts, again featuring the great Bud Root.
Yep.
And then here it is. Here's the poster guys who told you about. This is from the first book, kor-drath the Reckoning, and then this is the one from the new one, the Awakening. And you can see, yes, they do go together.
Yes, they do.
And the new parody. I love this. The parody ad is hilarious.
I love those. So
yes, I always like those in the comics. Hostess fruit pies, and the Hulk wanting to beat people up because they're stealing his fruit pies or whatever. That's hilarious.
Oh yeah.
And then we got some stretch goals here.
Yep.
And let's see. So where are we at money wise? Let's take a look here. We're at 53,900. So we're only about just over 6,000 away from breaking that 60,000 mark, folks, to get that stretch goal for Andy. So let's see what we can do to help him out here and back the book today. Yeah. He's got over 700 backers. Let's see if we can get that up to 800 backers, folks. We can do that. That's definitely possible. We can make 800 backers for Andy for kor-drath.
There you go.
So we'll get that going for him. And so just make sure to back it as soon as you can. kor-drath, the Volume 2, The Awakening, the second in the series of Andy's barbarian pastiche of Conan, which is much more violent and sexual in nature than you see the real Conan. I think even Robert E. Howard might be a little impressed with where Andy went with some of this stuff.
Hey, it is 64 pages of ball-busting barbarian action. So
there you go. How can you not want to back it now after an endorsement like that?
Not a slow page in the book, and I've got 10 left to do for this one. So
yeah, back it now.
Back it now.
Back it now when you'll see it next Tuesday.
Yeah, well, not next Tuesday, but close.
Well, I want to thank Andy Smith for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. We got to see some sweet art and hear some cool stories. And like I said, make sure to check him out on YouTube and back his channel, and become a subscriber so you don't miss some of the great art he's drawing up there for you guys, as well as some great reviews. And then back kor-drath Volume 2, the Awakening, and help him keep the spirit alive of Robert E. Howard.
That's right. Exactly.
And I will thank you guys for joining me today, and say to make sure to subscribe to this channel. There will be links down below to all of Andy's stuff as well as all of mine, so you can check out past stuff from both of us. And also be sure to throw any comments you got down there, because we always want to hear what you guys got to say. I'm always interested to hear what the folks are thinking. And be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed. And if you have, share out some links, especially of this stuff like this. But it's a lot of fun, and bring in some more folks. And I will be back soon with some more stuff. And so until next time, take care.